Men are fed, a lot of lies that, your happiness or your manhood or whatever it is found by, chasing the next Tinder date, chasing the next woman. But that's not where true happiness lies.
Good journalism is not trying to tell you how to think. It's just telling the facts, letting the reader, letting the audience decide for themselves. That's my goal with all the books I've written.
Why do they hate you?
Maybe hate's a strong word, dislike.
Okay.
I think that stems from the fact, I'm honest with myself.
Sure.
And you know this, most people aren't. And I don't necessarily know why. I think it's because it's hard. It's hard to look in the mirror and be like, hey, I have to take accountability, responsibility for my actions.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily blame them. It just works for me.
I have a very special guest with me, author, journalist, entrepreneur, Quentin Super. He has not only a bachelor's, but a master's degree too in his craft. He's a very well-versed man, and he has been just around telling people stories from all different walks of life, of business owners, content creators, entrepreneurs, small business owners, you name it, he's done it. Super excited to talk to him today. He came all the way from Minnesota to talk to me. He's my friend, and he's grown to be just a great friend over the years. And I just want to say, welcome, Quinton. How are you?
Thank you, Aram. Appreciate it, man. I'm doing great. Happy to be here in LA.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You liking LA?
It's all right.
It's all right. Okay.
I like you. I like Ruben, and I like In and Out. That might be about it.
There we go. Yeah, we got Ruben in the background. So, yeah. No, I know you can never go wrong with In and Out. So let's just get into it. Many people, pursue their degree, and then a lot of times they don't even use their degree. What made you want to, use your degree and utilize that to tell people stories?
Well, my degree's worthless, bro. I have my bachelor's degree's in film studies. So,
right.
I could come out here maybe and try to get a job as a key grip or something. But
right.
Otherwise, I do have a master's degree in English.
Right.
I try to write. I didn't necessarily start or get a degree in English to specifically write articles. It just sort of happened, and we can totally get into that. But you're right. Most people don't use their degrees. They just go there. They think they're going to get a cushy job afterwards. And my first job after grad school was a dishwasher. So, funny how things work out.
It's interesting, because you were a dishwasher and you told me that, but from where you started to where you are now, it's very impressive, I have to say. But you were a dishwasher, and then you had a little advertisement you saw on the internet to go to China. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, man, washing dishes, this is when I was trying to be a ghostwriter too. So I had these clients, I was getting paid $1,500, which amounted to probably 30 cents an hour,
right.
to write these books. So I wasn't making any money. Supplemented that with being a dishwasher, transitioned into being a bartender. And I'm like, dude, this is terrible. But while this was going on, I had already received I'd filled out basically a form on this random Facebook ad, do you want to live in China? And, 8 months after that happened, I was touching down in Beijing and moved there for about a year. So.
Yeah, it's incredible. So you were actually in Beijing with the program to teach kids Chinese. So
English.
Oh my God, did I say Chinese? I meant to say English. Yes.
Yeah.
They already know Chinese. You went there to teach them English. So
correct.
How was that experience?
I'm not a good teacher, bro. I don't know English to that degree. It's hard for me to be Apple. You can only do that 18,000 times before you want to blow your brains out.
Right.
So yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah. No, you actually go into your stories because not only do you write articles, you're a 3-time published author, and you actually wrote about your stories in The Long Road Through China, which is a book that I read. It's a memoir which, details your life throughout China and your experiences in China. And you don't hold back. You go into detail with everything. But, some people might look at that and they say, that's not right that he goes into that much detail in his book. He talks about a lot of personal things. But to me, I think that's pretty admirable because you tell the world the good, the bad, the ugly about yourself. And very few people are willing to do that in written word, which is there forever. I mean, you could buy it from now until, forever. So what gave you the courage to do that and to really write that book and take that leap?
It's a great question. I've been thinking about that in recent months. And I think in a way it's sort of therapeutic, right? So if people struggle with trauma, mental illness, whatever, I won't say I've ever had a mental illness, but certainly things I've done in my past I'm not proud of.
Sure.
And reflecting on that, it's a lot. You take a lot of responsibility, but even that, it's hard to get over it. So for me personally, like just having the skill of writing, being able to tell the stories that I've told in the written format, I think it's helped me process them and really move on from them. Like, obviously, like we're talking about me being in China, but on the daily, I don't ever think about the fact that I lived in China. A, because it happened several years ago, but B, I feel like, no pun intended, I've closed the book on that chapter of my life kind of thing.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and about writing and working through your trauma, what about that is so therapeutic? Because even Jordan Peterson, who we're both pretty big fans of, he talks about the power of writing, especially if something's bothering you 18 months after it happened. Really write that down, map it out, figure out what went wrong in your life. What is it about writing specifically that's therapeutic for you personally?
You have to think about what happened, right? So if you're talking about like a memoir in this case,
sure,
to actually go into detail requires reflection, and reflection leads to second guessing, right? It's like, well, geez, did I really do that? And so when it comes to memoirs, people could write all kinds of memoirs. They could make themselves out to be heroic, these awesome figures who are flawless. That's not me. I am far from perfect. I'm the definition of imperfect. I make a lot of mistakes. And I think I accept that, like in a self-deprecating, humorous way. And so I write about that because, you found the book funny. Some parts, it sounds like, when we talked about it. But if I wasn't honest with myself, if I try to make myself seem cooler than I really am, that book probably doesn't read the same way. It doesn't land the same way for readers. So writing really forces you to be honest with yourself. And if you're not, it's going to be hard to write something good, in my opinion. Right.
Absolutely. And we were actually talking about that yesterday at lunch. We were talking about, to be in social media, put yourself out there on social media, any type of artistry, any type of work, whether it's writing or you're, content creating on social media, whatever it may be, people appreciate authenticity. And unfortunately, sometimes authenticity does not get the most clicks because it's not outlandish. You're not doing anything, anything insane to bother other people. Because unfortunately, that does get clicks, but it's not long lived if you really want to leave a legacy with your work. So I appreciate that you have that lens to understand that, you're not a perfect person. You're not making yourself out to be a hero. And when I read the memoir, it's exactly, you weren't making yourself out to be a hero. As a matter of fact, you're not making yourself out to be a villain. You're just telling us what you did in your life in China. So I appreciate that,
Well, thank you. I'm a journalist, right? So good journalism is not trying to tell you how to think. It's just telling the facts, letting the reader, letting the audience decide for themselves. That's my goal with all the books I've written.
Yeah, and I wish there were more journalists that actually respected the fact. There's a lot of journalists that participate in, I guess you call it yellow journalism, if that's the term, that they think the audience does not have a mind for themselves. They want to make up the audience's mind. It's like, no, just give the facts, and then people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. You don't need to chew it and swallow it for them. They could let them, figure it out and digest it.
I agree. But look what happened with like Donald Trump, for example, or even Joe Biden. It's like it doesn't matter which spectrum of the political parties you're on. People try to paint narratives. And so they say outlandish things. They try to portray these guys as villains or heroes because that's where the money is, right? The more outlandish things you can say, the more money there is. In fairness to them, like I don't make a shit ton of money from my journalism. So maybe they know something I don't.
Yeah, but journalism, whether it's on, more local, smaller scale, or when it's on a big scale in sports, politics, media, whatever it may be. So the logic still sticks. So, I get what you're saying. Absolutely. So one thing I always wondered is when people write memoirs or autobiographies, they sometimes write about experiences that they had many years ago. And me personally, I can remember some things from years ago, but I can't remember, detail by detail. So one question that I was wondering as I was reading the book, and it's perfect time to ask right now, is as you were in China, were you kind of like, can you foresee that you were going to write a book and you were just writing down your experiences, jotting it down in a notebook or something in China for the future? Or how did you remember everything?
That's a very good question. I remembered these things over time. So key elements, like if you read my first two books, they're day by day accounts of what happened. The third book, The Long Road Through China, I'm encapsulating an entire year. So as opposed to trying to capture every single day, which requires a lot more detail, I'm just talking about specific events. And so writing it 6 months, a year after it happened, you're able to do that because you don't need every nuanced detail. Mm-hmm. Whereas in The Long Road East, for example, it was every single day was a new chapter. It's like I wrote that book quite literally that 5 days after I got back from that trip. Like that's when I started the process of actually writing that. That's why that one's a little bit more detailed, where the long road through China seems like, again, it's just encompassing a whole calendar year.
Do you feel like you've developed as a writer you had the long road north, the long road east, long road through China. So that's your third book. Do you feel like you've developed as a writer, not just through more encapsulation of what happened, but do you think you've developed more as a writer? I mean, people that have read your book could have their own take on it, but I want to know Quentin Super take on it because you're the one that wrote the book, so you would know.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd also be kind of sad if I didn't, because I've been doing this for about 7 years, 8 years now.
Right.
And if you do anything for 7 or 8 years, you're just naturally going to get better if you put an honest effort in. So to directly answer your question, yeah, I've certainly gotten better as a writer, but I'm sure the people who hated me or hated my writing back in 2017 when my first book came out, they probably still don't like me or the stuff I write nowadays. And it's just totally fine. That's just what comes with being a creator, someone who's putting themselves out there, especially in a vulnerable way like I do.
Why do they hate you?
Maybe hate's a strong word, dislike.
Okay.
I think that stems from the fact, like, I'm honest with myself.
Sure.
And you know this, most people aren't. And I don't necessarily know why. I think it's because it's hard. It's hard to like look in the mirror and be like, hey, I have to take accountability, responsibility for my actions.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily blame them. It just works for me. Like, I can't look at myself and not be honest with myself, because then it's like I feel like I'm compromising my integrity. Like, nah, I'm being inauthentic, and I don't want to be inauthentic.
So there's some people, let me give you an example. There are people that I know that have had the same character traits from their girlhood or boyhood, and they, grown men and women now, married, kids, the whole 9 yards, and they have those same character traits. And what I'm trying to get here is, have you always been that way? Have you always been honest with yourself and accountable? Or did you grow into it? Or were you like that since you were, a little boy and it just developed into your adulthood?
Excellent question. Definitely grew into it.
Okay.
Okay. I remember being a teenager, like wanting to date girls or wanting to go out with girls, having absolutely zero success, And I thought, well, the way to get that is to be, pretend to be someone I'm not. Sure. So I started doing that. Well, that didn't work. And then it was kind of around 18, 20 where I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to be me, because whatever I've done in the past has not worked.
Sure.
It's like, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail on my terms, whether that's romantically, professionally, what have you. That would be my advice to anyone, is like, just be yourself. And at least if you have success, or if you don't, it's on your terms versus, again, you trying to embody a characteristic of someone who you're just not.
Yeah. And that's really good advice. Do you mind if I push back on that a little bit?
Go ahead.
I do agree with the sentiment of, be yourself, because that's just an easier way to live life, right? It's just easier. Why would you make your life harder? Life is as hard. Life is hard as it needs to be. You don't need to make yourself harder. But let's say you being yourself is someone that's not disciplined, let's say. You're not disciplined in your career. You're not disciplined with the food that you eat, and you suffer as a result from it. Well, for you to be yourself and sustain that position, but for you to operate at a higher level is not necessarily yourself. You're behaving in a way that you haven't before. So in a way, people could say, well, no, that's not being yourself. You were undisciplined, now you're becoming disciplined. So don't you think there's room to change?
I think what you've described is like being aspirational.
Sure.
I think most people do. Unless I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but like
that's however you want to take it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, we always strive to be better. At least hopefully we strive to be better than we are. Like even now, I suppose, like in a weird sort of way, I'm probably trying to be someone I'm not yet, because it's like, well, I want to be more successful than I am currently. So I don't know, I guess you could make the argument that I'm not acting like myself, but it's also with good intentions. I'm trying to make the world a better place. I'm trying to improve my life, my family's life, So I would call that more aspirational than it is inauthentic.
Right. Because that's definitely the way I see myself, because I look at myself from like a third person point of view. I step outside of myself. I step outside of me, and I look at me like, imagine there's a ghost there looking at me. And I say, okay, this is what his life is. He needs to improve in this, and this way. So I'm always kind of analyzing myself, and you yourself, I've known you for a while and you're a super smart guy. So I just want your take on things, because if there's something that maybe I don't, like, I'd love to like feed off of that and be like, okay, maybe there's a different way of looking at things. If that makes sense.
Of course. And vice versa, man. Like there's things you can teach me. Like that's just the beauty of like conversation, relationships.
Right.
Again, I'm imperfect, very far from perfect, always looking for other people for any sort of guidance or tips I can get. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. So to walk me through the process of self-authoring, because we used to live in a time where you had to have a publisher, sponsor you, take you on. They would publish on their terms. But thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, I don't know, because I don't know the publishing world. I haven't written before. You could do it on your own now. And there's differing opinions on it. I have friends that I've published, friends that, I've had that have said, no, the self-publishing world is such a difficult world and there's so many issues with it. And they just straight up don't like it. They would rather be picked up by a publisher. But as you know, that's a very difficult thing to do. How's your opinion? What's your opinion on the, self-publishing world and the just business structure about it, behind it?
Sure. Great question. First and foremost, I would say for most people who self-publish, it's a losing endeavor financially. But knowing what I know now, I would encourage people not to go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to publish this book. Let's say spend $3,000, or $5,000 and then recoup that money. No, you're going to lose it. But what you're going to do is it allows you to create a brand for yourself. And then you can sell off of that brand, whether that's speaking gigs, whether that's, I don't know, some people do courses. Like I don't do that because I have my own opinion on courses. But,
sure.
You can do whatever you want once you've quite literally authored a book. At the same time, I think there's a cliche going around, like the best thing to happen is social media, but the worst thing to happen is also social media. Mm-hmm. Self-publishing is kind of the same way. Like it gives a platform to people like myself who otherwise would not have one. But within that, there's also people who just absolutely should not publish books who are publishing books. And so, the best thing about it, though, is the market will decide. Like the market to this point has said, hey, like we don't like your books, right? Because I haven't sold thousands of copies. That number is probably like hundreds of copies, if that. So, but it's allowed me to do so many other things. What I do now with the website, that doesn't happen if I don't take that leap 8 years ago and spend $3,000 to publish The Long Road North. So bet on yourself if you actually believe in it. I think Amazon can go on there and publish for like, I don't know, a couple bucks or something, but that's not publishing. Like guys like me, Sam Lacrosse, like we're true authors. Like we really want to invest in what we do. We want to be good at it. We just haven't been recognized by the mainstream or a big publishing house.
Yeah, well, you know what, man? I think the publishing's professional. The cover art's beautiful, and I'm big on cover art. People say, oh, it doesn't matter how it looks. No, it does, because the cover art captures you. What you read it, that's up to you if you want to say or not, but you need for it to look good for you to even pick it up in the first place. So you do have to judge a book by its cover sometimes, I really love the memoir, The Long Road Through China. It made me laugh. It made me reflect. It gave me a lot of emotion. So I want to say, even if you did, sell 100 copies, I think it was great. So,
well, thank you. That really does mean a lot. And anything you liked as far as cover or even the book itself,
the whole thing,
got a great team behind me, great graphic designer, great editors. I'm just grateful for the people who helped me support whatever I want to do.
Yeah. So I want to get into that in a little bit more detail, because I'm looking at this through the lens of, there's someone watching this right now and they want to publish, they want to, self-publish, and they really want to put their time, their money into it. They want to do it legitimately. So let's just use your experience and try to learn from it. Okay, what's the process? You think about publishing a book and you get a graphic designer, or just walk me through the process of it, if you don't mind.
The entirety of the publishing process?
Right.
So for me, again, this is kind of crazy to even admit, but I was coming off a breakup 8 years ago. I was heartbroken. I have this book. I'm like, I don't know if it's any good or not. I quite literally just Googled how to publish a book, ended up getting connected to this publisher in New York. Long story short, gave him $3,000 or $3,500, whatever it was. And then about 6 to 8 months later, the book actually came out. They handled everything. So for context, when you're paying a self-publisher, you're paying them to do what a traditional publisher would do. So a Random House, a Penguin, they would pay Patrick Bet-David, Jordan Peterson, X amount of dollars to write the book. And then they would have a team who would edit it, a graphic designer who would create the book cover, all those things. They would handle distribution. A self-publisher does all that. It's just they're not going to invest their money in me because there's no guarantee I'll give them an ROI.
Right,
so I'm paying them to go through that entire process of, again, setting up my book, distributing it, etc., putting it on Amazon, all those things. And there's different levels to it. Again, I keep using the number 3,000. I think it's $3,000 to $4,000 I spend on each book to actually publish it. I've heard of people spending, upwards of $15,000 to $20,000. So, you can spend as much or as little as you want. You could go the Amazon route and just click publish. I think you got to put some money into it. I don't think you have to put $20,000 into it, but I think you have to put a couple K for sure.
So if you don't mind me asking, maybe 20,000 is too much in your opinion, but do you think 3 to 4 is okay?
Just based on like the final product that I've gotten, for sure. But again, like maybe it's even more than 4K, because again, I got to pay my editors. I got to pay the graphic designer. Those guys, especially when they're good, they're not cheap. So it's an investment, but you're not looking at it like, hey, if I sell 3,000 copies, I'll get my money back. It's like, how can I leverage this book to, again, get a speaking gig, to land certain clients for my website, to attract clients to my website who want me to write about them? That's kind of where you make your money in many ways. It's not on the actual tangible book.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about your website and tell me a little bit about what you do. I think it's incredibly fascinating. You wrote a really nice article, about me, and I appreciate it. So what you do, just for the audience, it's awesome. He sits there, he talks to you, he's asking very deep questions, but he has a way of just talking to people. You feel like he's just talking to you like he's an old friend of yours, which he is my friend, but he doesn't make me feel like that. He makes anybody that he sits down with feel like that. It's an awesome process. He sits down, he asks you some questions about your life and what it is that you want to focus on, whether that's your business, your personal life, whatever, it's up to you. And then a couple of days later, he has a nice draft for you about a beautiful article that he writes for you. And that's very hard to come by. A piece of literature written about you in the media, it's not really, you don't really see that. You don't see that too often. That's something that he does. So I think it's very cool, but I actually want to let the guy himself talk about it. So
sure. I mean, you described it very well. I appreciate that. I mean, the idea started because like I told you earlier, I was trying to be a ghostwriter, working for pennies on the dollar, there was no money in it. It's like, because people, like we just talked about, I was basically writing a book that someone would then have to later spend more money to self-publish. Well, where's their ROI, right?
Right.
But I was sticking with it. And it's like, well, how can I bring value to people? And then it was like, I'm going to write articles about people, following that sort of YouTube podcast formula that to me is very oversaturated. It's like, well, let me tell stories not in 60 to 90 minutes, but in 5 to 7 minutes with an article, 12 to 1,500 words. Google's algorithm loves that. It's going to rank for SEO, for Google searches, that sort of thing. Like basically giving them a really short book that tells their story. That was the idea. And then I learned a couple of years ago that like Forbes, Men's Health, they charge people like 10K to do the same thing. You read those articles, they're absolute dog shit. And I'm like, whoa. There's a gap here, right? Elon Musk always talks about like disruptors in the market. It's like, I'm going to disrupt that market. Like, I'm not going to charge someone $10,000 to write an article about them. I'm going to do it for a fraction of the price and it's going to be good. And that's what I do. It's as simple as that.
Yep. Yeah. And how has it helped your clients? Can you give some like client testimonies of how they felt after the fact it was published, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. People put this article in front of their clients. So again, you think of a traditional podcast, if you wanted to sell that to one of your clients before you ever meet them, like they're not going to watch your 60 to 90 minute podcast. Like, yeah, they could learn a lot about you, but people just don't have the time. But a well-polished, professionally written article, you put that in front of your client before you ever get on the phone with them. It's just a way to engender good faith. It's a way to build business, overcome objections before you ever jump on a call with them. Like, to give you a little bit of context, so I'm a sales consultant for a roofing company as well. And I send clients an article titled, "How much does a new roof cost?" Well, in that article, they'll find out approximately how much they can expect to spend for a new roof, but I'll also go over everything that makes our company unique. And that's just kind of the brilliance of what I do in many ways is like, let's say for you want to get Jordan Peterson, Dana White on your podcast. Well, you guys,
I hope to, yes.
You hope to, right?
Yeah.
And they might not be a great example because they're like celebrities and stuff, but someone more locally you want to do business with, what's going to capture their attention? Well, an article is a really good way to do it because they can learn about you before they ever agree to hop on a call, to come to your podcast. Again, just cements and solidifies yourself as a professional, an authority in the space.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would definitely agree that having like a piece of literature officially written for you online, by just saying it, people might say, well, what's the big deal? But when you see it in action, it looks a lot better, and you have a beautiful cover. You have, it's a nice cover. It's a cover of you and the person that you're advertising. You have the logo, you have the whole 9 yards, and it actually does, put you at forefront. Let's say you're applying for a job and there's 50 candidates and you're the only candidate with an article published about you, that automatically makes you stand out. Or in just whatever medium you want to go into. In this case, a job, it does make you stand out. So yeah, I would agree that it's definitely something interesting. Now about podcasts, I think podcasts are very helpful too. Would I agree with you that that's long form content, and that maybe if you're not someone that's well known, would people sit down and watch it? There is less of a chance. So I would understand that having that, 5 to 7 minutes, like quick read article is a good way to consolidate who you are, what you want to market. So
for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone reads my article. I'm not saying it's ever going to get more views than even a podcast video, but it's a tool that I encourage people to use to leverage to gain business, because much like I made with the example of the roofing industry, if you are going to spend, let's say $20,000 on a new roof, you're probably someone who has money, probably is someone who is like educated. You're going to be diligent in your approach. You're not just going to hire somebody you just randomly met off the internet.
Sure.
You're going to be very methodical again in your approach. So that's the idea about it. You're trying to appeal to that sophisticated buyer. For you, it's like you're trying to appeal to someone who's like, they don't just go on everyone's podcast. They want to go on a podcast that's special and that's unique. So that's why I work with a variety of people in a variety of different industries. So if you ever look at my page, you're like, well, geez, you got like someone who sells language cards, or someone who works in nightlife, or someone who's applying for a job. Who are all these different people? That's because my tool, I'll call it, can just help a variety of different people.
Absolutely. And you range from anywhere from media content creators to CPAs, to people in the sales industry, to barbers, to people in the nightlife, like you just said. The range and the breadth is just completely just horizontal. It's not vertical where it's just like, one type of professional. There's a whole range. And he was being humble a little bit ago. He said, I don't know how many people read my articles and all that, but read his books, read his articles, and you see the level of sophistication. I'm not just saying it because you're sitting here. The level of sophistication and just poignancy and just the level of passion that you have in your writing, it's hard to come by. I mean, do I see it with seasoned authors that are professionals that have been doing it all their life? Yes, I do. But for, the relatively newer person as compared to these other authors that have been around for decades, I think you might be selling yourself short, because it is really sophisticated. And I'm not just saying that, I mean that. So.
Well, dude, we got to go Chuck E. Cheese, man, because I got a big ass grin on my face right now.
He never fails to bring out the laughs and everything. So yeah, go to Chuck E. Cheese. I haven't been there in years. I went there.
The pizza was good though. You ever go there when you were a kid? Man, that was good pizza.
Pizza was good, yeah.
Yeah, the games were terrible, but like the pizza, man, like that's why you turn a new age every year, is to go to Chuck E. Cheese when you're 10 years old and get that za.
This sounds crazy, but I actually visited Chuck E. Cheese because I was like right around the neighborhood. Like, how is it gonna be after like 20 years? So I went back and I was like, man, I am not coming back here. So it was hilarious. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So where do you see yourself, going with QuintonSuper.com? Are you going to be writing more books? Where do you see yourself going into the future?
Great question. I think I got one more book in me. That's going to be kind of like a coming home story. The title's The Long Road Home. It's basically wrapping up all the debauchery, all the nonsense I was stuck in, like, hey, Quentin, we cannot find inspiration at the bottom of a bottle of Grey Goose or on Tinder or at a club, chasing women. There's got to be more to life than just that.
Yeah.
And so it's me kind of going through my own hardship, my own trauma to try to come back home and really figure out who am I as a person.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the last book. Beyond that, I want to build a team for QuentinSuper.com, get people just as talented, if not more talented, writing for me. That's an endeavor in and of itself. That's going to take years to really build and flesh out. But beyond that, just help people.
I love it.
That's how I've gotten to this point, man. I'm not special. I'm not unique. Like, I just try my best, try to put a smile on people's faces, try not to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And that's why we're here.
Yeah. And honestly, it's really good because a lot of young men like yourself, they don't admit to the problems that, men are fed a lot of lies. I think, that, the amount of,
And women.
And men and women, everyone's fed. Well, I'm just talking about men because we're just both guys. You know what I mean? So that's why I say that. But men are fed, a lot of lies that, your happiness or your manhood or whatever it is found by, chasing the next Tinder date, chasing the next woman. But that's not where true happiness lies, because that's just a bottomless pit that leads to nothing. It really is through helping people, leaving an impact, fulfilling your purpose, self-actualization. And I'm really happy that you're here to admit that, because a lot of men have that pride and they say, it doesn't matter to me. But I'm happy you have that humility to admit that. So that's great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. A lot of internal work and just, again, being honest with myself.
Great. And more people need to do that, to be honest with you. Yeah. Awesome. And then QuentinSuper.com. So you want to build out a team, or what do you mean?
So like right now, for example, I have 2 writers underneath me. I have a guy in Argentina who creates content in Spanish. So whether that's translating my articles in English. I worked with him at a summer camp, like 8 years ago.
Wow.
Went and visited him actually last year and like spent time with him and his family. That was cool. Like I speak good Spanish, but I can't write in Spanish. Like I could never do it to like a professional level like he does. Like he's a published author. I think he's published like 7 books. Wow. Like he's an ace. And so again, I need people much more talented than me to really build this thing out. Cause I don't even know if I'm a good writer. And I mean that in like the best way. Like the stories the books I've written, I'm just retelling what happened. It's not like me creating something in my head and like coming up with this awesome Chronicles of Narnia shit. It's just like, hey, this is what I did once upon a time.
Yeah, but you're retelling what happened, but you're not just blandly explaining it. You have that flair and that passion. I really like it. That's all I have to say.
Hey, dude, that warms my heart dearly, and I really
I'm sure many others. Yeah,
absolutely. But again, if we're talking about helping other people, like how many books can I honestly write about my life? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's dude, like I'm 31 now, trying to get married, have kids. Like my life's pretty boring on a day-to-day level, and in a good way. Like I'm happy that it's boring. I don't want to go back to like the hard party and lifestyle at all.
Structured. Yeah.
But beyond that, it's like, I read in a book once, how many people can you make rich? Like that's a sign of a good entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's not really about whatever wealth I can achieve, but like if I can put money in other people's pockets, writers, graphic designers, web developers, etc., that would be the hallmark of, I think, success.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is about helping people, because when you help people, you can't really explain. It's just a different type of feel. It's a different type of satisfaction, because you serving yourself only goes so far. And a lady that I sat down with, Michelle Brown, she taught me about dying to self, and she's very smart. So it is about, dying to yourself and serving other people. So yeah, shout out to you, Michelle. So that is something that is really just a Christian principle, and a principle that you could apply to yourself. So it's a great principle to live by. So yeah. You seem to be in agreement with that.
I'm in concurrence. Yes. I concur with you, Arameh.
You concur. All right. Awesome. All right, man. Perfect. Well, it's been great. Sat down. We just learned a lot. But before I let you go, I want to ask, where can people find you? How can people get into contact with you? Just tell the people.
Sure. Just Google my name, Quentin, like Quentin Tarantino, last name Super. Pretty easy to find. If you see some tall, ugly kid, that's me.
And it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, so
Facebook. Ahead. Yeah, all the major well, not all of them. I'm not on like X or Y or whatever, T or Twitter, whatever it's called. Pinterest, all that stuff. I'm not on that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so he's on almost all streaming platforms.
Actually, just 3.
Just 3. So we got Twitter. Instagram,
Facebook, LinkedIn.
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Just type in Quentin Super, and that's where you could connect and work with them. Thank you so much for coming on, brother. I appreciate it. Coming all the way from Minnesota, it means a lot to me. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. Comment down below what your favorite part of this interview was. Let me know what your favorite part of this interview was. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.